My aunt left me with nothing for refusing to give her my baby after I got sick. You can't even breathe right, let alone raise a child, she said. She posted a poll, should my niece let go of the baby show ruin? I fought. I healed. I kept my son. Today, that poll is on a slide in my TED Talk. I'm Serafina. I was 25 when my mom died. A quiet Wednesday morning in Canton, Ohio, and my phone rang just before 7 a.m. The hospital told me she was gone before the ambulance even reached the ER. Brain aneurysm. No warning. I was at her house, my house now, alone and in complete shock, with only the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and the hum of the refrigerator to keep me company. My mom was my everything. She raised me by herself, worked night shifts, and made miracles out of ramen and discount canned soup. We weren't rich, but we were close. I thought the worst part of losing her would be the grief, but no. It was what came after. It was Ramona. Ramona was my mom's older sister. She lived 20 minutes away in a tidy, beige colonial in Massillon. She wore pastel twin sets, curled her hair even for grocery runs, and talked to her dogs like they were people. She had no kids, no warmth, and no boundaries. The kind of woman who looked at grief as weakness and motherhood as something you either did perfectly or not at all. At first, Ramona came across like she was helping. She brought over meals, cleaned out the garage, helped me cancel my mom's magazine subscriptions. She made herself useful, and I let her in, because I had no one else. I had no siblings, no cousins I was close with, and my dad? Long gone by the time I was in diapers. I was grieving. Lost. Vulnerable. And then, just a couple months later, I met Kwame. He was quiet, funny, and kind. A carpenter who volunteered on the weekends fixing up homes for low-income families. He came into the bookstore I worked at every few days and eventually asked if I wanted to get coffee. We were both lonely in different ways. I told him about my mom, and he told me about his dad, who had died 2 years earlier. We bonded quickly. 3 months later, I got pregnant. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, holding that stick, crying. It wasn't just fear, it was also a weird, fierce kind of joy. I knew it would be hard, but I also knew I wanted to keep the baby. My life hadn't made much sense since mom died, but this baby felt like a reason to keep going. Kwame tried. I'll give him that. But somewhere around the second trimester, the calls got less frequent. He missed an appointment. Then 2. By the time I hit 30 weeks, he'd ghosted me completely. So there I was, 25, pregnant, alone in a creaky 2-bedroom house, with a half-functional furnace and a leaky roof, working part-time and trying not to panic. And Ramona? Oh, honey, she said when I told her. You're really keeping it? She didn't even try to pretend she was happy. Didn't ask if I needed anything. Just pursed her lips and stared down her nose. She started dropping in more after that. Bringing over baby books and clothing catalogs, making weird comments like, "You'll never sleep again. You'll see, and what if the baby ends up in foster care?" At the time, I chalked it up to her just being tone deaf. I had no idea she was planting seeds. At 33 weeks pregnant, I got a cold that turned into pneumonia. By the time I got to the ER, I could barely stand. I don't remember much of the first few days, just a blur of needles, wires, and terrifying gaps in time. Eventually, I was transferred to Cleveland Clinic. They sedated and intubated me. My lungs were failing. They performed an emergency C-section while I was under. I didn't even get to see my son being born. His name was Leo. He was 5 pounds, 2 ounces, and breathing on his own, barely. When I woke up, I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. I felt like I was drowning in my own body. But even then, even in that broken state, all I wanted was to see him. Instead, I saw Ramona. She was already there, sitting next to my bed with a legal folder on her lap. Her nails were freshly painted, and she smiled like she'd just won a bet. I spoke to the doctors, she said. You might be in recovery for a long time. Months, maybe. And what's going to happen to Leo while you struggle to breathe and learn to walk again? I couldn't even respond. My throat was too raw. But she went on like I wasn't even there. I think it's best if I step in. Temporarily, of course, she said, pulling out some paperwork. Just until you're on your feet. It wasn't guardianship yet. Just emergency authorization, she said. I refused. Shook my head as much as I could, which wasn't much. She looked annoyed. 2 days later, she came back. Same spiel. This time, more urgent. I still refused. That's when she snapped. You can't even breathe right, she spat. You really think you're going to be able to raise a child in that dump of a house you inherited? No job, no support, no health? She stormed out. And then she made the pull. I found out about the pull from a nurse. It was early morning, maybe 6:15. The night shift nurse, Letitia, was helping me sit up when she paused mid-sentence and glanced at her phone. She looked at me with that same expression people use when they hear about a dog getting hit by a car. She said slowly, I think your aunt posted something. She didn't have to say anything else. My chest went tight. Letitia pulled up her phone and showed me the post. A big, bold heading, should my niece let go of the baby show ruin? Below that, the poll options. I can still picture them, burned into my brain. Broken heart yes, the baby deserves better ZZZNO, let her try and fail shed attached a picture of me. From the hospital. Sleeping. Tubes in my nose. Looking half dead. She must have snapped it when I was unconscious. The caption read, my niece is in critical condition, on oxygen, no job, no father for the baby. I'm offering to take care of her child temporarily. She won't sign. What should I do? Hundreds of people had voted. Most voted yes. There were comments too. From people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old neighbors. Distant cousins. Even women from the church my mom used to go to. One said, that poor child. Someone needs to step up. Another, if she really loved the baby, she'd let him go. The poll had nearly 3,000 views and almost 200 shares. I didn't even cry. I just sat there staring at it, the oxygen tube hissing beside me, feeling like something inside me had been sliced open without anesthesia. Letitia was fuming. This is sick. You want me to report it? I shook my head. Not yet. Because deep down, something else was forming inside me, stronger than hurt, colder than sadness. Revenge. When I got discharged from the hospital, I went home to nothing. My savings were gone. My job at the bookstore had already replaced me. The heating in my house was spotty. Leo was still in the NICU, scheduled for discharge the next week. Ramona had left the spare key in the mailbox with a sticky note, call me when you're thinking clearly. I'll be waiting. There was no food in the fridge. Just a half carton of expired milk and mustard. But Leo was alive, and so was I. That was enough to light a fire. I called every social worker I could find. I filed for emergency benefits. I applied for WIC, food stamps, rental assistance. I filled out online surveys for $10 a piece at night, coughing through it all. And when I went to pick up Leo, when I walked into that hospital nursery holding a coat 2 sizes too big and a hand-me-down car seat, I knew I would never let anyone touch him again. The next year was brutal. I slept in 90-minute bursts, pumped breast milk with a dollar store manual pump, and taught myself how to freelance right between feedings. I picked up transcription jobs, odd typing gigs, and eventually started writing marketing blurbs for a home appliance company based out of Chicago. I fed Leo mashed bananas and sang to him in the living room while I typed with one hand. He was the only person who never looked at me like I was broken. He'd smile up at me like I was his whole world. But Ramona wasn't done. She filed a petition in family court 5 months after Leo came home. Said she had concerns for the child's long-term well-being. Said she believed I was mentally and physically unfit to parent alone. I didn't have money for a lawyer. So I represented myself. I printed out every medical record, every W-2, every freelance invoice, every note from my pediatrician and caseworker. When she walked into that courtroom, she looked polished. Lipstick, pearls, manicured to the last fingertip. I wore my one decent coat and held Leo on my hip. She opened her statement with the same line she used in the Facebook poll, she can't even breathe right. But I spoke last. And I laid it all out. Every dirty trick. Every manipulation. I showed the judge the screenshot of her poll, the timestamp of when she posted it while I was still intubated. I will never forget what the judge said. He stared at the screen for a long time, then turned to her and said, "You weaponized a medical crisis for control. That isn't concern, that's cruelty." He ruled in my favor. Ramona stood up, grabbed her purse, and left without a word. She never filed again. I still wasn't winning at life. But I had my son. And we were safe. Eventually, I saved enough to fix the furnace. I took on more clients. I even started working for a parenting blog that liked my writing style, raw, real, and blunt. They loved the story about fighting for custody from a hospital bed. It resonated. One article got shared over 40,000 times. The editor called me crying. She said I was doing something important. I didn't feel important. I felt tired. But something had shifted. Leo turned 3 that fall. He loved trucks and mango slices. He liked wrapping himself in the curtains and jumping out like a ghost. That's when I got the email. TEDx Cincinnati. Someone had read my article and forwarded it to a speaker coordinator. She wanted to know if I'd be interested in telling my story on stage. I said yes. Not because I wanted to be seen, but because I needed people to know the other side of the story. The one that wasn't in Ramona's poll. The one that started with, "I was intubated, alone, and still refused to give up my son." I said yes to TEDx, and then immediately panicked. What was I going to say? How could I take something so raw, so deeply personal, and package it into a polished 10-minute talk? I wasn't a public speaker. I was just a tired single mom who had survived pneumonia and a custody ambush. But they were serious. They sent over speaker guidelines, a timeline, and paired me with a coach named Ravi who called me once a week from Portland and had a voice like jazz. He told me, "Don't give them the story. Give them the fight." So I started writing. I wrote after Leo went to sleep, curled up on my second-hand couch, staring at my old laptop with the busted trackpad and the letter barely hanging on. The words poured out of me like sweat. I wrote about the hospital, about the silence of waking up and not knowing if your child is still alive. I wrote about the poll. I wrote about what it feels like when someone you trust uses your worst moment as a launchpad for their control. And I wrote about how I fought back. I had a line in the early draft that Ravi made me keep. She counted me out before I could even speak for myself. But I did speak. And the judge heard me. We practiced over Zoom. Ravi was patient, but he made me tighten every paragraph like a guitar string. "Make them feel it, Serafina," he kept saying. "You lived it, don't protect them from it." The day of the event, I wore a navy jumpsuit. I got clearance and did my makeup in the side mirror of my Honda. Leo was with a sitter named Marta, a retired teacher who adored him. I parked 4 blocks away from the venue because the main lot was full and walked in heels I hadn't worn since a wedding in 2016. Backstage was cold. The mic guy kept trying to adjust the headset on my ear, but my hands were shaking. I wasn't nervous to speak, I was nervous about seeing her. Ramona. I didn't know if she'd be there. I hadn't told anyone in the family I was speaking to. But I knew how she watched everything. She'd seen the article go viral. She must have known about the event. Whether she showed up or not, her shadow was going to be in the room. They called my name. I stepped out onto a red circle on a hardwood stage and looked out into the crowd. The lights were bright enough that I couldn't see faces. Just shapes. Just the sound of them waiting. And I began. 3 years ago, I was on a ventilator with a newborn son I hadn't met yet. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't even sit up. But someone in my family decided to speak for me. I clicked the remote. The first slide popped up. A screenshot of the poll. Big and ugly. My hospital photo on the left, the 2 poll options on the right. A Facebook banner above it. You could feel the air shift. I didn't let it linger. I didn't cry. I just kept going. She made the world decide whether or not I was fit to be a mother. Strangers clicked yes like they were voting on their lunch order. You could hear people sucking in breath. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. She didn't know what I had left inside me. And when I could finally speak again, I said no. The rest of the talk? A blur. Afterward, people stood. Some wiped their eyes. A few came up to me, hugging me like I was a long-lost friend. A woman with gray curls pressed a note into my hand that read, "You reminded me who I am." Ravi texted me, "You burned the house down." In the best way. that talk changed everything. It was uploaded to YouTube within 2 weeks. And it exploded. 30,000 views in the first month. Emails poured in, mothers, nurses, people who had lost custody, regained custody, fought through health scares, fought back against family members who claimed to be saviors but were really opportunists. I got invited to write for a mental health journal. Then a nonprofit that supports low-income mothers asked me to be a guest speaker. A brand offered me money to post a sponsored video, but I declined. That wasn't what this was about. But Ramona? She didn't decline the attention. Because as soon as the video hit the 100K mark, people figured out who she was. She had used her real name on the poll. Her comment history was still public. Twitter dragged her. And TikTok, God help her, TikTok turned her into a villain meme. Someone even made a skit reenacting the Facebook post. It got 3.2 million likes. I didn't tell anyone to go after her. I didn't even mention her by name. But people connected the dots. And the dots led to Ramona's carefully curated social life unraveling in real time. She shut down her Facebook. Made her Instagram private. Her church removed her from the events committee. And one of her neighbors started forwarding me screenshots of her neighborhood group chat, where someone shared the TED Talk link and asked, "Is this Ramona from Maple Lane?" Yeah. It was. And she knew I knew. Because she finally broke the silence. I got a handwritten letter in the mail. Postmarked from Massillon. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, decisive, slanted to the right like she was leaning into every word. I almost didn't open it. But I did. Inside, one sentence, "You made me a joke." I was trying to help. I didn't respond. Because she wasn't trying to help. She was trying to own it. Meanwhile, Leo was thriving. He was 4 now. Loved dinosaurs and Legos and telling every stranger in the grocery store, "My mom talks on a microphone." He still had the tiniest scar on his belly from his NICU days, and every time I saw it, I felt this wave of guilt and pride and rage, all tangled together. We were living in Columbus by then, renting a 2-bedroom with a tiny backyard. I had more freelance work than I could handle. People actually reached out to me, not the other way around. And I was finally breathing on my own. Not just physically, but in every way that mattered. But Ramona wasn't done yet. She had one more card to play. It had been almost 5 years since the hospital. Since the poll. Since Ramona tried to erase me from my own child's life like I was an inconvenience instead of his mother. And I really thought she was gone for good. But narcissists never leave quietly. They just wait until the world forgets what they did. It started small. A mutual friend messaged me on LinkedIn, saying Ramona had joined a board for a regional charity. They were doing a huge fundraiser, raising awareness for disadvantaged children. I felt sick. She was using my story, without ever naming me. I watched the promo video and nearly threw my laptop. There she was, Ramona in a lavender blouse, standing in a church rec hall saying things like, "Every child deserves a stable start." Sometimes, that means stepping in when parents can't. The comments under the post made my blood boil. So selfless. An angel. Such a role model. But I didn't comment. I didn't share. I didn't even breathe a word of it to anyone, at first. Then I got an email from a woman named Kristen, who worked at a podcast that focused on family law and real-life custody battles. She had seen my TEDx talk and asked if I wanted to be a guest. My first instinct was no. I was tired. I'd moved on. But then she said something that stopped me cold. Ramona Reeve tried to pitch her story to us 2 years ago. Same themes. Very different perspective. We passed. She'd used her real name. So I said yes. I recorded the episode on a rainy Wednesday. Leo was at preschool. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and my heart pounding like I was back in court. I told the full story. Every piece. Not just the Facebook poll, but the pressure, the threats, the courtroom lies, and the aftermath. I didn't say her name. Didn't need to. The episode aired on a Thursday morning. By Friday, it had 600,000 downloads. But this time, people started tagging the charity Ramona was now affiliated with. By Sunday, I had 6 voicemails on my phone, from Ramona. Each one more desperate than the last. The last one was the real gem. Serafina, I am asking you, begging you, to take it down. My reputation. I'm being pulled from the board. I could lose my seat at the Women's Business Roundtable. You don't know what you're doing to me. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something better. I emailed the charity director myself. A woman named Alice. I introduced myself politely, attached the public court documents from the custody case, included the screenshot of the Facebook poll, and linked my TEDx talk. I ended with a simple sentence: I am not interested in harming anyone, but I cannot allow my experience to be used as a lie to boost someone else's public image. Alice replied the same day. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We had no idea. Ramona has been removed from our campaign and is no longer serving on the board. And just like that, Ramona's shiny new public image cracked like glass under a rock. But that wasn't the real revenge. The real revenge came 6 months later, when I launched the Poll Project. It started as an idea, a small online campaign to tell the stories of people who were publicly shamed or doubted in moments of crisis. Mothers, fathers, caregivers, teens, sick patients, survivors of all kinds. The tagline? They voted yes. We survived anyway. I put Ramona's poll on the landing page. Blurred her name, but left the question exactly as it was. Should my niece let go of the baby show ruin? And below it, stories. Photos. Quotes from people who had been told they were unworthy. The site went viral. Nonprofits shared it. Podcasts picked it up. Journalists reached out. And eventually, a digital learning platform reached out about building an educational toolkit based on the project, for social work students and legal advocates. I didn't just take the pain and bury it. I turned it into something living. Something loud. And Ramona? She vanished again. I'm not sure where she went, or what she's doing now. I imagine she's licking her wounds in silence, cursing the internet for having a long memory. But the difference is, this time, it's not just me who remembers. It's thousands of us. Now, I live in a little house in Dayton. It has a blue door and a porch swing. Leo is 7, and last week he wrote an essay called Why My Mom is a Warrior. He spelled warrior wrong, but I framed it anyway. Sometimes, we drive past the courthouse where I stood up for him. Sometimes, he asks why I talk into microphones. And sometimes, I show him. But I always end the story with the same line: they doubted me. I didn't.